Yo, 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 what is up, everybody? This is Colin, back at it again with another episode of A New Direction, episode 3 to be exact. This is the podcast where I just kind of talk about all sorts of random topics and discuss my interests in all sorts of things, ranging from music to food to cars to literally everything. Um, just supposed to be like a place where you can come and listen and hang out and chill with me, and we can just kind of vibe and have a good time. So, today's episode introduction is going to be a little different from the previous ones. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about some more personal things, I guess, in this episode. Um, my kind of like my plans for the rest of the year, my history with music, information about like my cars, my dream cars, stuff like that. I'm a huge car guy, but we'll get into that. And then lastly, my favorite historical time period. So we've got a variety of different topics to cover today. But before we get into that, I first want to do my music recommendation of the episode. And so it was a little difficult for me to come up with something because I've been listening to a lot of different music lately, but something that's definitely stuck out to me and is the choice for this episode is the album Spiderland by Slint, which is a very, very, very well known post rock album, and it is fantastic. Absolute banger of an album with some great tracks, great riffs, just very much deserving of its notoriety. And so, notable tracks for me are definitely Breadcrumb Trail and Nosferatu Man. Very, very good. The guitar work, especially that intro on Breadcrumb Trail with the harmonics on the guitar. Oh my god. It just hits different, and I highly recommend it to anybody who wants to listen to something a little more post rocky. And I think through a lot of these episodes, you'll probably find that most of my recommendations are kind of centered around either metal or post rock or stuff like that. That's really my favorite sort of styles, and so I'll definitely have other sorts of music as well. So keep that in mind. But for the time being, it's definitely going to be a lot of post rocky and metal stuff because that's really what I'm into right now. But with that out of the way, we're going to dive into the topics of discussion, starting off with cars. And so, I guess to begin with my history with cars, I actually was not a car guy for a long time. I'm 18 years old now, but I didn't really start getting into cars until I was 15, 16 ish. And what really got me into cars, and this is a very cool story, but I had a friend in high school whose name was Jacob. And Jacob had a Mustang. He had a Mustang GT 5.0, 2018. It was a convertible. It was a 10-speed automatic. First year of the Gen 3 Coyote motor. And he got that car when, let's see, I would have been, I think he got it when I was 15. He got it as like a 16th birthday present or something like that. And so I was 15 years old, and at the time I had a 2009 Ford Escape SUV. So, V6 SUV was not putting a lot of power to the ground and was most definitely not going to be in any sort of league with a Mustang GT, especially a 5-liter V8 Coyote. And it just so happened that one day Jacob let me drive his car, and I was terrified because this was like the nicest car I've ever been in. It was brand new pretty much at the time, and he was entrusting me to drive it, and I had only been driving for, with a license at least for less than a year. And so here he was handing me the keys to his, 460 horsepower muscle car. And naturally, I drove it. I remember I turned out of the school because I met him at school, and we had both stayed after, and he let me drive it after school. And so I distinctly remember turning out of the school. I made a left turn out of the school, and he told me to like just punch it. And I laid into the gas, and like from that point forward, that first pull I did down the road outside my school, I was hooked. It was immediate. I just immediately became enthralled with horsepower and torque and just everything from that moment. That first pull down the road, spelled the end for me when it came to regular cars, I guess. And so from that point forward, I was obsessed with Mustangs, especially. And to this day, even all these years later, I'm still a huge Mustang fan. I still drive one now, and we'll get into that here in a second. But yeah, so the 2018 Mustang GT was my first experience with any sort of fast car. And a lot of people will say that that's not a fast car, with Hellcats and stuff like that being out. But that is a fast car, especially for the street. That is way too much power for the street, pretty much 460 horsepower. I mean, his car was doing 0 to 60 in less than 4 seconds on street tires through my town. It's ridiculous. Like, it's not going to get dusted or gapped by anything really around town unless, you just happen to pull up next to the Hellcat or something like that. And even still, the 10 speed has a good chance of taking that Hellcat if it's modded outright with the E85 and everything. But that's a whole different discussion. But from that point forward, I was just hooked on Mustangs, hooked on cars, and so I started researching the hell out of them and just like learning everything there possibly is to know. And that is where my hobby with cars really started. And so I wanted a Mustang naturally after that, and so eventually after, let's see, I probably drove his car in, would have been maybe like October, November was the first time I drove his car. And my birthday was in January, and I was turning 16. And so I wanted a Mustang, naturally. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to get the 5-liter because, that's just a very expensive car, especially for a teenager. And so, at the end of the day, when it all was said and done, I ended up getting a 2005 V6 Mustang, automatic transmission. I will post a picture of it on the screen here. It was red, and it looked like a GT. It had all the GT parts on it, the GT front bumper, the rear bumper, the dual exhaust in the back. It had the GT spoiler, the GT hood scoop, the louvers on the side, and it had the AMR style black rims. And it was a mean looking car. It was a very, very beautiful, captivating car to look at. It was the paint was just very bright and vibrant, and it looked really, really good. It was a beautiful car, but it was a V6. It was slow as hell. That car was literally like slower than like a commuter car. Even like my dad at the time when I had that car had a turbo, like a 1.4 liter turbo Jetta. And I have no doubt that his car would have gapped the hell out of me in that V6 Mustang, because that turbo, that car was crazy peppy. And the V6 was just slow. The throttle response was good. It had a cold air intake, but it was not a very quick car by any means, and it really just sounded kind of loud. It had like Flowmaster exhaust on it, and it just sounded kind of loud and bad, and didn't really go anywhere. But it looked pretty doing it, I guess. And so that was my car, my daily driver for, let's see, almost 2 years, I believe. I got that car in January 2019, is that right? January 2019, and I got rid of it in July of, was it 2018? I can't even remember now. I'll have to look back on my pictures and I'll put it in the description, but I pretty much drove that car for almost 2 years. I think I almost had it for a full 2 years, but it was a little less. But I ended up getting, over the summer during quarantine 2020, in July, I got a Mustang GT 2003 Mustang GT Premium in the dark shadow gray, 5-speed manual. It came with ESR deep dish polished aluminum lip rims that just look fantastic, and I'll definitely post a picture of the car. Her name is Goose. I'll definitely post a picture on the screen. But I ended up getting Goose, and that is currently my daily driver now. I've had it over a year now, and I love the car to death. It is an incredibly fun car to drive. Very raw. The driving experience is very just. You are manhandling the car, and you definitely feel everything when you're driving. You can tell you're doing all the work. It's not smooth. It's not, a comfortable driving experience even with the suspension. It's on lowering springs, but it is incredibly fun to drive, and I love it to death. And I finally got my GT. All those years ago, I had dreamed of having a Mustang GT when I first drove Jacob's car, and now here we are, 2 years later, and I've got my own GT. I'm still trying to get that 5.0. Definitely still a goal, and very recently I've been looking at just like pricing out 5.0s and everything, but the insurance is high, and it's going to be a process if I decide to get one, and I definitely want to test drive anything before I decide to commit to buying a car like that. But for anybody out there who has a 5.0, I've been looking at the 2011, 2014 Coyote Gen 1s. So if anybody has any experience with those, I would love to hear about it in the comments, and kind of how your ownership of those cars has been over the time that you've had it, because I've heard they're really reliable. They're really great. The Coyote is obviously a very stout drivetrain. You're not going to have any, or powertrain, I guess, rather. You're not going to have any sort of issues with that as far as reliability goes, other than the basic, upkeep. So I would love to hear anybody's experiences with those, and that also brings me into say, if you're liking the content, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. I would love to have more people on board and join the community here. So if you like what you hear, definitely please come back. I would appreciate it. But that kind of covers cars, really. My dream cars, definitely the 5-liter V8, the 5.0 Coyote, a C6 Z06 Corvette. Definitely the LS7 is just a monster. I would say it's honestly hard to pick. Like, those are definitely the two like main ones. Like a GT350 probably would be an extension of like the 5.0 specifically. The Voodoo, the 5.2 is just a monster in its own right. But yeah, those two for sure, a C6 Z06 and a GT350 are definitely main dream cars for me. I also wouldn't mind having, Hellcat, a C63 AMG, anything like that. A BMW, one of the V8 M3s from, I think it was 2008 to 2013. I can't quite remember. But, I'm not a huge German car person or JDM. I'm very much a domestic, U.S. domestic car person, but I love all sorts of cars. But those are definitely some of the dream cars I have. But that leads us into the next topic here, the plans for the rest of the year, kind of switching gears. I know that 2021 has been a very confusing year for a lot of people. A lot of stuff has kind of gone on, and it's been like a limbo sort of stage coming from 2020. And, 2020 on its own was just a crazy year with everything that went on. And so 2021's kind of been like a part two, like a sequel, especially with all the new, news and everything in the headlines right now. It's 2021 has definitely been a very crazy year. But as far as like my plans for the rest of the year and kind of going into 2022 is definitely going to be college, continuing on with my college journey. I would highly encourage anybody who, is listening to this and is unsure about committing to college. I felt the same way. I was very unsure about committing to a 4-year university. I wasn't really sure if that was the right choice for me, the right avenue. And I ended up going to community college, and I'm very thankful for that because it has been very nice to have a good school, work, life balance, because community college where I go is very flexible. They work around your schedule. You can pick out your classes and kind of the time frames for them and everything. And it's just been very nice to have such open flexibility with all of my classes and my teachers and everything at school. And so I would highly encourage anybody who's unsure about going to a 4-year university or feels like they're going to get burnt out. I totally understand that feeling and kind of where that comes from because I felt the same way. And so community college is definitely a great option in that sense. It's definitely been the right choice for me, I think, even if it was a hard one to make. I had always, I guess, kind of dreamed of going to like a 4-year college or going to like a full university and getting like a degree from there and all of that. That had been like a dream of mine. But at the end of the day, you got to do what's best for you and make the choices that are going to benefit you and your life overall. And community college has definitely been very, very good for that for me. As far as beyond school, I definitely want to start working on writing some new music. As I mentioned in I believe the first episode, and probably maybe the last one. I know I had the link in the description for the last one, but I just recently dropped my new album, Lament, on Bandcamp. It's on Apple Music and Spotify now. Um, Link will be in the description for all of that, but writing music is definitely a big thing for me and is a very good emotional outlet for me. And so I definitely want to continue, writing music and setting that precedent of trying to release some new music, because it took a long time for me to write music that I was comfortable with and, that I was happy with. And, music has been a huge part of my life, and that kind of transitions into the next topic here on the list. My history with music. For the longest time when I was a young kid, I was probably first or second grade back in the day. I was just listening to like the pop radio hits and stuff. And I didn't really I liked music, but it wasn't really my my passion at that time. I listened to it and I enjoyed listening to music, but I didn't, I guess, fully appreciate it. And, I just kind of listened to what was on the radio. But, and that all sort of changed in fifth grade, because in fifth grade, my brother showed me, Lamb of God, As the Palaces Burn, fantastic album, which I think I mentioned in another episode, the first episode. I think I talked a little bit about that. But, I specifically the song Ruin off of that album was the first one that I ever heard. And that was my introduction to metal. And metal quickly became my number one genre. And I think I just realized now that I did not mention As the Palaces Burn in the first episode. That was something different. And so, Lamb of God, As the Palaces Burn was my introduction to metal. I was in the fifth grade. And it was definitely a very stark contrast to the radio music that I was listening to at the time. You had like Starships by, was it Katy Perry or something like that, was really popular back then. Rihanna, those type of artists were all that was on the radio at the time. I remember going out on the local lake on the boat. My family had a boat, and we would go out for hours and hours at a time, and I would just sit and listen to the radio music. And it was like Kiss 95.1, the radio station. So for anybody in the local area, will definitely know what that is. But it was a lot of pop music, radio music, stuff that I don't really listen to at all now. And so my introduction to metal really sparked my passion for music, I would say, and it took some time to build. But after listening to Lamb of God, I started getting into bands like Animals as Leaders, they're like more progressive metal, which Animals as Leaders, even to this day, their albums are very, very good. Even their most recent one that, if I remember correctly, was released about 3 or 4 years ago now. It's a banger. Even though I kind of was out of Animals as Leaders when they released that, I still really like it. But that was kind of my focus. There was like Lamb of God, Animals as Leaders. I kind of got into like metalcore at this time. I was listening to like The Devil Wears Prada and like metalcore bands, really, like As I Lay Dying, I think, was one that I listened to some. I kind of got into the I don't want to call it like radio metal, but like when you pull up like the satellite metal station, these are the kind of songs that you're playing or listening to like in your car. Not really heavy stuff, but more metalcore kind of music like that. That was kind of my first sort of branching out with metal. And then I kind of went from metalcore, I got into deathcore and really, really extreme bands and kind of into high school. So I was listening to like Infinite Annihilator and Within Destruction, bands like that. And I mean, deathcore is definitely not a genre I really listen to anymore. I don't really like it like that anymore. But there are still some I guess, quote unquote, deathcore bands that I still like. Notably, Black Tongue from the UK. Their most recent album, Nadir, is just fantastic, and it's still kind of in my daily rotation now, even though I haven't listened to deathcore in years now. But that's still a banger of an album that I still like to listen to, through the week. But I kind of got into deathcore for a long time, and it was kind of in this period where I started learning to play guitar, and so that kind of spurred my interest in learning new music and trying to experiment with different songs and genres and stuff. And so I ended up buying like an 8-string guitar to play deathcore, and I never used the 8 string because it's so low you don't really ever use it. And I'm not a very virtuosic player, so I'm not sitting here shredding the hell out of this 8-string guitar using all the notes and everything. I'm just not doing that. So I ended up getting rid of that, and then I kind of got into more like kind of back into more like classic sort of metal, like not traditional, not necessarily like Metallica, but like older metal, especially like extreme metal, like Celtic Frost, Mayhem, Bathory, Emperor, especially black metal. I got really into that, and that was kind of led into the present here, where I still very much listen to all of the extreme sort of Norwegian, Swedish black metal bands, second wave, especially Mayhem, definitely my favorite. But on top of that, now I'm kind of branching out. I'm listening to more folky stuff, post rock, hence the Spiderland recommendation at the beginning of this video. I really love that album, and I'm branching out. I like kind of bluegrass, expanding my taste there. I just recently bought a banjo that I've been learning how to play, and bluegrass is definitely, being from South Carolina, is definitely like a Southern culture heritage type thing, and so it's been cool to listen to bluegrass music. But yeah, I mean, my taste has definitely become very diverse as I've gotten older, and I like a variety of different things. And so I guess my encouragement to anybody who is not really into music, or hasn't really found their niche with their preference, with music and everything, the genres, just check out a bunch of new stuff. Like, don't be afraid to go into something with open ears and an open mind, because you will be very surprised at what kind of, good music there is out there that you would never have even considered, whether it be because you just weren't feeling like trying new music, or you were kind of biased to favor something else. Like, music is definitely something that is very, very, very important all around the world, for all sorts of cultures and for all sorts of reasons. And so experiencing all the varieties of it, I think, is very, very cool, and I highly encourage anybody, especially people who aren't quite into music like that, to check it out. Dive in and try out some new things, because you will be very surprised at what kind of goodies you'll find, diamonds in the rough, if you will. And I especially find that to be true, when I try to find new music and experiment and learn new things. But music definitely has a huge impact on my life, and I am very, very thankful to be able to appreciate music and, write and release my own material. And, I'm definitely very blessed in that regard. And so I'm very thankful for those things, and for music in general, for being an emotional conduit for me, and being a good coping mechanism for anything, really. Music is great for that. And so I highly recommend checking out music to anybody who isn't into it like that. And check out my album too. Like I said, link in the description. It's like a dark ambient sort of sound that I really, really liked. And so I kind of wrote a whole album with it, and I think it turned out really well. I would love to get opinions. But that kind of covers my history with music. Not necessarily my musician history, that'll be a different topic, but just like music and my appreciation for music and how it's developed, that is really a good kind of overview of everything. So leading into the last topic here of this episode, I'm going to be talking about my favorite historical time period, which is honestly something that's very hard for me to even, I don't know, it's hard for me to even choose just one, because Some context about me. I'm a huge history nerd. I love history from all sorts of places, not just, U.S. history, but the history of other countries, of regions, all the way back thousands of years, learning about the human species and how, we've adapted over time, and, all this cool stuff, the Romans, the Greeks, the Egyptians, ever since I was a kid, I've always been into studying history. I distinctly remember being in elementary school in like third or fourth grade or something like that, and I got selected for Terrific Kid, which was like this program where your teacher and like your class selected you to be like the representative for that like section of time, like the period of time that the Terrific Kid thing went on. It was like a month, I think, or something like that. And you got like a bumper sticker for your parents' car and like a ruler and all this stupid shit that you never used. And so I got selected for Terrific Kid one year, and I distinctly remember in the presentation, like session where everybody's families came and cheered you on for getting it. The teacher in the class would write up like a write up about the student, and I distinctly remember being recognized for having a broad ancient Egyptian knowledge, and this was back in like you know when I was a young kid. So my love for history has definitely spanned quite a few years now, and so picking my favorite historical time period is definitely a hard choice for me because I know a lot of different ones. But if I had to pick one, or I guess I'll expand it to two because I almost split history up into more recent history and then old history. If I had to pick my most favorite recent history time period, definitely like the Civil War, probably the American Civil War. Something about it has always been very fascinating to me. How it was just Americans killing Americans, and the Civil War was just a crazy time for America, and Abraham Lincoln was having to hold the whole country together pretty much, and the whole country wasn't even together at that point. So it was definitely a very interesting time frame for the United States and the history of the United States, and a lot of the changes and reforms that came out of the Civil War. The effects of those can still be seen today, and I just think that the Civil War in general is a very fascinating time period to learn about, especially like just recently, the other night, I was watching a documentary about the Battle of Gettysburg, which was the bloodiest battle of the conflict, and just reading about like how these soldiers were, they were all Americans, and they're just like charging each other to death. Like, it's crazy to think about and to picture, and the fact that you can still go visit these battle sites today is like incredible to me, and I would love to go see Gettysburg one day. It's in Pennsylvania, and so maybe one day I'll make the road trip to go check that out. But uh, the Civil War is definitely my favorite, more recent historical time. But as far as ancient history goes, I would definitely have to pick something like, I don't know, like the ancient Mesopotamian region, like the Sumerian Empire, the Akkadians, and kind of leading up into biblical history. I'm very fascinated by, that time frame, 2000, BC to, maybe like the year zero. The whole BC time period is just crazy to me that we are able to go visit these archaeological sites and see the relics from these, cultures and periods of time that were just thousands of years in the past now. And that we're able to learn about these people and read their writing and, learn about everything that they were talking about back in the day. I think that's crazy. And especially how, our, religions and stuff are based around, were developed a lot during these time periods, and just kind of how the religious history ties into the archaeological history and everything, I think is incredibly fascinating to read about. And I highly recommend anybody researching, the ancient Mesopotamian region where, human civilization first really started to grow from, and kind of expand around the world, at least. And people came from everywhere, but, the Mesopotamian region is definitely what's heavily focused on in school, and so I feel like most people have a pretty good understanding of at least what it is. And so I think it's just really fascinating to read about that and research those things and those cultures and people that existed those many thousands of years ago, and how their ideas still have an effect on ours today, and the things that they were capable of coming up with back in the day too. Like, back in the thousands of years ago, I mean, these people were doing math. They were able to recognize the stars and the different planets and stuff. And it's just crazy to me that these people, despite not having the technology that we have or the access to even anything comparable to what we have today, these people were still able to come to the same conclusions and ideas that we are today. I think that's incredible. And I would definitely love to go visit over there someday, go see the ancient sites, and go to like old Israel and Jerusalem, and just see all of those ancient sites that I've heard so much about through my life, and see what they're really like. I think that would be awesome. But that pretty much wraps it up for today's episode. I appreciate y'all tuning in, and I hope that this video finds y'all in good health and good company, and that y'all are having good weeks. This will be coming out on Wednesday, so I hope that y'all are having a great midweek, and that everything is going smoothly leading up to y'all's weekend. But I've been Colin with the New Direction podcast here. Stay chill, and I will talk to y'all next time.